no splaying out. So this is the example of the faraway sun, that the rays, this is what we should experience coming through the clouds. The rays from a sun that's almost 1 million miles in diameter and 93 million miles away, when those rays get here, they should be parallel and dead straight. But we don't see them as dead straight. We see them splaying out or diverging from the clouds. Something's not right here. Okay, here I am inside. Notice I got my light close. Look at already, you can see the light splaying out. You see that? I drew you can see the circles on the floor and on my piece of cardboard actually. Those are the original size of the holes that when I was outside, they lined up perfectly. Here, you can see them completely splaying out. And if I put the rays on it like this, the sun rays, and that's not even as splayed out as they got, it's just that the cloud is in view. And I want you to be able to see the cloud, which is my cardboard with the holes cut out of it. That way I could line up the rays. But as you can see, when I moved up a little bit off the floor and put the light even closer, the rays really splayed out. So I just wanted you to see that. Okay, so there you go. There's hard evidence that when the light source is close to the clouds, the light will diverge. The dispersion pattern you can see when I was outside, the dispersion pattern remained the same, meaning the 5 holes that I had, like that, stayed exactly the same, and that's a faraway light source. But when the light source was close, they splay out. That definitely supports the flat Earth model of a small, close sun. Okay, let's analyze this claim that science makes, and Wikipedia makes, that the crepuscular rays are due to perspective, that they're actually very close to parallel lines. For all intents and purposes, they are parallel, coming from a sun that's almost 1 million miles in diameter, but we don't see them parallel coming through the clouds. Those crepuscular rays are angled outward. They splay out. They're diverging from the clouds. And Wikipedia is saying that that's due to perspective. Okay, and Wikipedia also uses railroad tracks like these. And they say, see how these converge at your horizon, or they diverge from the perspective of the sun outward? And they're saying that that's what's going on here. Okay, so we need a quick little review of perspective. Notice in this long hallway, all parallel lines and planes angled to the eye level or the eye position of the observer. Notice that the side walls angle in, those are parallel lines to one another, and the ceiling and the floor are also parallel, but notice how they angle toward each other and they come to your eye level. All right, you have an X, Y, and Z axis. So the railroad tracks would fit your Z axis. That's going away from you, and those lines, yes, they converge. But the sun, and especially when the sun's overhead, would be bombarding us with huge vertical parallel lines, or rays, parallel rays. Yet, we don't see any of that, ever. So what I'm going to show you here is that this claim that these crepuscular rays is due to perspective is not true. It's impossible, because perspective will not converge or diverge or splay out lines or planes that are parallel to one another, that are perpendicular to the viewer, or his z-axis. Okay, so like in this picture of the railroad tracks here, the lines going away from you, that's I did with the green line, that's the railroad track, that's obvious. And right from the get-go, they start to converge. Now those are parallel lines, but yet we never see them as parallel. They're always converging as they go away from you. Now the black poles that I have going down the side of the railroad tracks are also parallel lines to one another. But notice that they stay parallel. They don't lose their parallel orientation. They may get shorter and they get smaller, that's true. They do have a sort of a convergence, but they don't change their parallel orientation, these vertical lines, because they're perpendicular to you. Now, this is why invoking perspective to explain the crepuscular rays doesn't work, because perspective does not splay out these vertical lines, yet whenever the sun is overhead, we should see vertical parallel rays everywhere, and yet we don't see them. So perspective as an explanation for this is invalid. You know, what we see is the rays emanating from this omnidirectional sun. The rays fit the size of the sun, and the angles of the rays off the sun also fit the size of the sun and the shape of the sun. But they shouldn't fit the size of the sun if the sun is in fact almost 1 million miles in diameter and 93 million miles away. The rays should be huge and the sun small. So that's telling us that the sun is in fact close. Okay, and let's go back to what Wikipedia said. Wikipedia says that the rays from the sun are in fact parallel lines, But we don't see them that way because of perspective. Perspective displays them out. Okay, look at this picture. I put these rays in. Okay, so this is what's really going on, Wikipedia says. They say that rays are really parallel, and they would be from a million-mile diameter sun. But this is what our eyes do through perspective. It displays it out. Okay, here's another one. They say this is how they really are. They're vertical and they're parallel, but our eyes display them out like this. Okay, so then why doesn't perspective take these telephone poles and splay them out like this? We don't see that, do we? Why doesn't it take these buildings and splay them out like this? They're vertical and they're parallel. Well, because what we see, the crepuscular rays, is not due to perspective. It's just due to the nature of an omnidirectional light source with the light coming out in all directions. And it's coming from a small sun. It's impossible that this sun is a million miles in diameter, as I've already showed you. So then if it's not perspective, these crepuscular rays are not due to perspective, as Wikipedia and science in general claims they are, then what are they? Well, it's very simple. All they are is radially propagated light. Or another way of saying it, light rays emanating out from a common center, like the sun, or any light. And I understand that the light rays coming off the sun looks like perspective. It shares the common trait where, with perspective, all the lines and planes converge at a point in the distance called your vanishing point. The sun also has that look, where looks like the rays all converge at a point in the center of the light. Actually, the light rays are emanating out from a common center, but I can understand how they look alike, but they're not the same. Okay, that's all it is. And so, as we've already proved, that perspective can't explain the crepuscular rays, because where are all the vertical parallel sun rays then? They don't exist. Okay, so next I'm going to show you with streetlights and sunlight and how they look exactly alike. Okay, let's take a look at some light rays. Let's look at how the sun and a street lamp look the same. The one on the left is a street light, and the one on the right is the sun. Okay, notice that the light source and the rays match one another. And with the street light, that light is here on Earth, right? It's right there on your street, and those rays look in proportion to that light. They're also here, right, on your street or wherever you see that light. The sun, they're telling us, is actually far away, but the light rays are close, like when we see these crepuscular rays coming through the clouds. And did you know that streetlights also have crepuscular rays, just like the sun does? And you know what? They look identical. Let's have a look. Here on the left, that's a street light, and those are crepuscular rays coming off of that street light, and they look identical. They are in the same proportion as our sun and its rays. And you can't say that that's perspective, because they're right there, and as we've seen, perspective can't explain those rays anyway. So those rays are nothing more than radially propagated light. In other words, it's light coming from a common center. That's all. And look at this one. The left one is a street light. The one on the right are the sun rays. They are both in proportion to one another. The light source matches its rays, which indicates that they're both local. Okay, and this street light is here. We know it's here, and we know those crepuscular rays are here. There's no fooling us and telling us it's 93 million miles away or a million miles in diameter. And it looks just like the sun, that they're telling us is far away and huge, and whose light rays are here, though, on the Earth. Same here. Same as what we see in the sky. The sun matches the sun rays. But in the heliocentric model, with a sun that's 93 million miles away and almost a million miles in diameter, the rays should be completely out of proportion, like this. You know, we shouldn't maybe even see the sun. Maybe the sun should just be a blob of light on the other side of our lit-up atmosphere from these huge rays. I mean, we see the sun like it's in our atmosphere, like it's close, but it can't be, according to the heliocentric model. And next, I want to show you how, in this photo, perspective is actually missing. And what's ironic is the very linear perspective that they tried to invoke to explain this photo is actually missing from this photo for the heliocentric model to be true. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, I mean they invoked perspective to describe or explain these crepuscular rays, the fact that they're splaying out from the clouds, because they had to invoke perspective or something, because this picture doesn't work for the heliocentric model. This picture of these crepuscular rays is a problem for their model because the sun is supposed to be 1,000,000 miles in diameter. But the problem is they've invoked perspective, but perspective doesn't work because, as I've already showed you, it doesn't explain the parallel vertical lines that we should see all over the place. Perspective will not splay those out, right? So these vertical rays should be everywhere, the parallel vertical rays, but we don't see them. The perspective that's missing is like the sun is out there and it's almost 1,000,000 miles in diameter, right? So its sunbeam, it shoots out a sunbeam, and that sunbeam is 100,000 miles wide, let's say. But what we see from here looks very small, right? But not when it gets here. When it gets here, it's going to be massive, okay? But yet, look at these sun rays coming through the clouds. They're small, they're skinny, they're tiny. They match the local sun that we see in the sky here. So that's what I mean by perspectives missing. And let me give you a couple of real-world examples to help you figure this out. Okay, now imagine you're at a football game, an American football game, and you can see the player, the quarterback, down in the field, and he's as big as a peanut, okay, on the field, even smaller. Okay, and the football is the size of a short grain of rice. And he's got this great arm, and he turns around and he throws that ball up to you in the stands, and he can throw it all the way to you. Now, I got a question for you. When the ball gets to you, is it going to be the size of a grain of rice, or is it going to be the size of a regulation football? Well, it's going to be the size of a regulation football, right? But that's not what we see in this picture with the sun rays. Those sun rays fit the size of the sun. And now let's take a look at this soccer player, all right? For those of you who don't know American football, there, he kicks it, he's far away, and when the ball gets to you, it's going to be the size of a soccer ball, right? This is proper perspective. This is the perspective we're not seeing when we look at the sun. The sun that we see in the sky is close. Okay, here's a train leaving a station far away down the tracks. Also analogous to the rays leaving the 1,000,000-mile diameter sun. Okay, the rays would be massive just like the train is massive compared to that little train station. Right, that's proper perspective. Now look at these shafts of light coming from the sun, the rays. The sun on the right here, each of its rays that you see coming off the sun would be about 100,000 miles wide, just like this. You could fit 10 Earths side by side in that ray. Okay, so when we look at these rays, they're not 100,000 miles wide, and they're diverging out from a small sun that we see in the sky. I mean, that proves right there, the sun is close and small. Now, I know somebody's going to seize upon this and say, hey, wait a minute, but we don't see perspective with the sun traveling over the flat Earth. We should see it shrink to a dot and disappear. We don't see that. Well, I was going to save this for another video, and I maybe still will, but let me introduce to you celestial perspective. It's different than regular perspective that we're used to every day. Regular perspective, we see a train on the tracks, and as it goes away from you, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it disappears. But the sun, on the other hand, is different because the sun, when it's quote-unquote next to you, is high overhead and has already experienced a reduction in size. Now, as it goes away from you, it follows the convergence lines down to your horizon, essentially keeping it same distance from you. So the two movements offset each other. The one, the sun moving away from you, and then the visually lowering as it follows the convergence lines down to your eye level horizon. Also, the sun is too big to shrink to a dot anyway, right? It's going to go below the observer's horizon before that happens. Now note this about the convergence lines. Notice that on this wall of lines, the higher up they get, the more steep they get. They orient themselves away from the horizontal and more to the vertical. So the train on the tracks, as that goes away from you, it's right on your eye level. It's actually on your z-axis. Here's a picture of the z-axis, x-axis, and y-axis. It's on your z-axis, so all you can see is the train gets smaller and smaller and smaller. You can't see any movement laterally or vertically out of that plane. But the sun is different because the sun, even though it's cruising over the Earth parallel to the ground, it's on a much higher plane. So when it's overhead, it's already had a visual reduction in size. So now when it goes away from you and it follows those convergence lines down, it'll appear to be the same size because the going away and the lowering kind of offset each other. And same as this train. If you put this train high up overhead, that will cause it to already have a visual reduction in size also. So now when it goes away from you, it too will maintain its size. Kind of like if you're flying a kite, right? And you have the kite and it's a mile overhead, well, it'll appear a certain size, right? But let's say it takes a nosedive, but the string stays taut, so it goes all the way to the ground. Now it's a mile further down the road from you, but it's still the same size visually, right? So that's kind of how this works too. So let's recap. In my experiment, I showed that when the sun is close, the rays splay out, but when the sun is far, the rays are straight parallel beams. Yet, this is what they show us, this picture of crepuscular rays, and say that that's a faraway sun. Then I showed you how perspective can't explain what we see because it doesn't splay out things like these poles or these buildings. And then I showed how the sun mimics perspective. It has the same look. The light rays radially propagate outward, or they radiate out from a common center. And that's what we're seeing with the sun. It's not perspective. And then I showed how the streetlights, the crepuscular streetlights, match the sun. The same crepuscular rays from the sun and from the streetlights, and they look identical. Both local light sources and local rays. Then I showed you celestial perspective, and that's different from regular perspective, like the train going down the tracks that's on your same plane as your eyes, and as that goes away, it can only shrink. It gets smaller and smaller. But the sun is high up overhead, so it's vertically already had a visual reduction in size. So as it goes down to your eye-level horizon, it'll maintain its same size. Okay, and that wraps up celestial perspective, and that wraps up this presentation. I believe we made a strong case, a lot of evidence here, if not complete proof. And thank you so much for watching. There's only one thing left to do. Let's kick the ball out of here. Take care.
The earth is flat, living in illusion. The earth is flat. We take some illusion. The earth is flat, living in illusion. So people don't know what to do. The earth is flat, living in illusion. The earth is flat, taking illusion.
The Earth. Is it really just a big ball floating in space? Spinning on its axis at 1,000 miles per hour, hurtling around the sun at 67,000 miles per hour, whizzing through the Milky Way at a milk-curdling speed of over 500,000 miles per hour, and warp driving through the heaven at over 500 million miles per hour? And what about the sun? Is it really 93 million miles away and close to 1 million miles in diameter, with a circumference of nearly 3 million miles? And it's constantly illuminating half of our entire Earth's surface with the rotation of the Earth, creating our 24-hour days, our night and days? Or, the Earth is flat. Maybe it's completely still, just like we experienced. And maybe the sun isn't big. It is very small, very close, and not illuminating the Earth for 93 million miles, but is illuminating locally. And maybe everything, the sun, moon, and stars, are not far away, but are circling overhead relatively close. In this video, we're going to explore the latter option, and at the end, we're going to reveal startling evidence through the use of time-lapse photography that the sun cannot possibly be 93 million miles away, but is in fact very close and is illuminating locally as it traverses our flat Earth. Oh man, and watch how this sun comes at you. Boom! I mean, come on. And that's all perspective. If you look at jet trails Google Images, you'll see them. They start out low at the horizon. They come up overhead. Look at that thing. They come up overhead, and then they go down to the horizon. Perfectly explains what the sun would do. Here it is going overhead. I love time lapse. Look at this. You can't go out and look at the sun. You can't see this stuff, except that it's on, time lapse like this. It's incredible. Now watch this thing. It's sweeping. The sun over flat Earth is doing a big circle, right? Look at this thing. See it sweeping to the right. It's like a lefty bowler. Just toss that down the alley, and there it goes, hooking into the pocket. You can see how the clouds angle down to the horizon. And shut it there. That's exactly how the sun would do on flat Earth. Okay, back to the Copernican principle, and this is what they tell us. The sun is 93 million miles away. Now, I'm going to show you evidence through sunsets that shows the sun light following the sun over the horizon, and it shrinks as it goes over. Now, there's no way it would do that if the sun is 93 million miles away. Okay, first I'm going to show you some footage from the ISS. Okay, now watch this animation. Watch this sunset. Now, this is exactly, if they came to me and said, do an animation, this is how I would do it. If the sun were 93 million miles away. Just like that. Have the whole horizon fade evenly. But that's not what we see. Okay, wow, look at that. Look how the light lifts off the ground like a big wedge, or like lifting up a sheet of paper. That's incredible footage. Definitely the light's following the sun, right? Okay, next I'm going to show you how a sun that is circling over the Earth, that creates the horizontal aspect of the sun. If you combine that with perspective, which creates the up and down of the sun, the rising and the setting, you get the 23.5 degree tilt that they talk about. It's nothing but perspective and a circling sun. Here's another sun sweeping out a big circle. Okay, here's a phenomenon that you might be wondering, how in the heck do you explain this on a flat Earth? Well, this footage is taken from Alaska during the summer, and the sun does look like it's going up and down. The reason it's doing that is that this town in Alaska is not in the center of the sun's circular circuit. In other words, the sun is making a big circle, and the town is not in the center of that circle. So the sun will be closer and further from the viewer with the camera. That will cause it to go higher and lower, and also maybe even bigger and smaller. altitude airplane. Remember, this is from a high altitude balloon, so that airplane is probably at cruising altitude. Notice how it looks like it's going up from the horizon. That's exactly how the sun will rise, because that plane is staying parallel to the ground. And now watch, it'll go down to the other horizon. All right, again, perspective, that's how the sun will set. And forget the big ball, that's just due to a GoPro camera. But see how the sun, that's the point of this. And then also, look at the size of the sun, man. Look at that thing. I mean, there's something to it to say that we're higher up our view and the sun looks bigger, and it looks like it's not as high in the sky as it does when we're on the ground. Something to that. Let's explore this notion a bit further, that the sun looks bigger when filmed from higher up. The next 3 slides, I'm going to do a comparison, a side-by-side. The one on the left, the camera's above the clouds. The camera on the right is ground level. And the point for the side-by-side comparison from the ground level and the level above the clouds is that above the clouds we're only maybe a mile or so up. And if the sun appears to be closer to the camera, well, that means it's probably much closer, because if the sun were 93 million miles away, a mile closer wouldn't make any difference at all to its visual appearance. Okay, here's a little illustrator or a little cartoon from a website called timeanddate.com. It's really funny that they would have a perfect illustration of a sun rising and setting on a flat earth due to perspective. You'll notice that it rises from below the horizon and sets below the horizon. Now you might be saying, well, how's that possible? I can see now you're saying that it rises and lowers due to perspective, but how does it disappear below the horizon? Well, I got a theory about that. Because of the fact that all parallel lines and planes converge at your eye level horizon, this is according to the perspective, I'm not making this up. If in fact, and they do, they converge at your eye level horizon visually, then it makes sense that after that point, they diverge, meaning they then separate. So the sun would continue on a downward track. As you can see from my illustration here, the lines would go to your horizon, and then afterwards, they would spread out and separate, kind of like a starburst, and the starburst being at your horizon, at your focal point. Start talking about, and I'm going to start showing you the time lapse of the sunsets that I'm talking about that clearly show the sun is close and illuminating locally. Here we go. All right, and here are a couple of time-lapse sunsets. And just like the sunrises at the beginning of this video, where you could see the sun coming at you, not maintaining any 93 million mile distance, here you can also see the sun moving away, and it's clearly not due to the rotation of the Earth and a sun that's maintaining 93 million miles away, but the sun is moving over the Earth and moving away from you. Okay, these next three slides, the sun is almost set already behind the horizon, but watch as the sunlight shrinks and follows the sun. It's definitely a locally illuminating sun, not far away, not very big, and definitely not 93 million miles away. Okay, remember this video from the beginning of the video? I showed you this one and how it's circling over the Earth, and watch it sweep to the right like a bowler bowling it in there for a strike. Okay, now I want you to pay attention to the way the light follows the sun. The sunlight's going to shrink, right, as it follows the locally illuminating sun. Watch this. See it shrinking, following the sun? You do not get that if the sun is 93 million miles away. The entire horizon should fade evenly. Just like this supposed shot taken from space of the Earth. You can clearly see the way they depict it. They depict the demarcation between day and night, or light and dark, as a long straight line. And you can see the long straight line moving as one solid piece. That means that the sunset should all fade, the entire horizon should fade evenly. But that's not what we observe, as we will see and as we've seen in the footage so far. The sunlight shrinks and follows the sun over the horizon. So these time-lapse sunsets are definitely the nail in the coffin for heliocentrism. But this particular one here, shot from above the clouds from this observatory, is the final nail in the coffin. Look at how the sun just shrinks and the light shrinks to nothing. That cannot happen, as I showed you in the when the sun illuminates the entire Earth, which it does from 93 million miles away. It has to. You don't get this isolated look at the sunlight trailing the sun. That's only possible with a small sun close, not very high, illuminating locally. I mean, if this isn't proof to you, then you gotta take the blinders off. Okay, and finally, I want to show you some examples of local illumination, or a city in the background. This is from Grand Canyon National Park. You can see Las Vegas is one of them. You can see the stars going down, so you know that's not the sun. That's the glow of Las Vegas, it says. You can see that's local illumination. I'm just making an example showing you that there's Tuba City and a little bit of Flagstaff. Now, in this one here, you see two lights. Obviously, we don't have two suns, but these are two cities lit up, and it's just to show it looks just like the sun going over the horizon. That's the point of me showing that. That's local illumination at work. The sun is not 93 million miles away, because if it was, the entire horizon would fade evenly, and the entire horizon would fade at the same time. Not what we see here, which is the small sun cruising over the earth and the light is following it. Case closed.
The earth is flat, living in illusion. The earth is flat. We take some illusion. The earth is flat, living in illusion. So people don't know what to do. The earth is flat, living in illusion. The earth is flat, staging illusion. The earth is flat, living in illusion.
Right here. Okay, we're saving some word pics right here into our flat earth files. You say, well, what does ancient Egypt have to do with it? Well, even the ancient Egyptians knew that the earth was not a ball, and that there is a truth to the flat earth perspective. Let's just put it like that right here. We're saving some of these because we want to teach from them.
I've had my world turned upside down or right side up by this. Where's this curvature? I've spent a lot of time researching this, a good 7 months, and I've seen a lot of different things. There's a lot of topics to talk about. Where's this curvature? See, but you got to give me an explanation for this if you're going to call me crazy. You know, I'd love to go back to believing that I live on a spinning ball. Where's this curvature? And if this isn't some massive conspiracy and we all haven't been duped, but human beings are very easy to fool. And it's actually much easier to fool a human being than to convince human beings that they have been fooled. Where's this curvature? You know, we come into this world, we don't know where we come from. We don't even know how our thought process will actually work. You know, we don't know how we're able to simultaneously create thoughts and perceive them at the same time. You know, we still can't explain that. So what do we really even know? Where's this curvature? Anyway, that's getting off topic. Where's this curvature?
Dan just told us it's flat, and that's all it is. It is flat.
Now came the most critical part of the mission. Two space surgeons began a complicated operation to replace several black boxes buried inside the satellite. After slicing open the skin, they disconnected hundreds of wires and then reconnected them, using the cargo arm as a moving work platform.
55, I think good job here. Okay, that's
See your thumb? Watch again at this pressurized glove as it bends just like a normal thumb.
Dan just told us it's flat, and that's all it is. It is flat. And what we have here is the moon, and a daylight shot of the moon with the sun also. As Jared would say, let's roll that beautiful beam footage. Like I said, this is 2:35 p.m. in Tennessee, December 18th, 2015. We'll pull out here now, and I want to just show you that we have the sun is shining. Of course, you can tell the sun's shining. So I'll pan over here. No edits, no cuts. It's just a straight pan to show you the sun's in the sky. No big deal. We have the moon and the sun in the sky here at the same time. So I wanted to check all the way around the backside of the globe, Australia. Yes, Australia, we have the moon at 52.8%, and it's 4:32:51 a.m. I think the sun will rise. I looked at it as I can remember, it either said 5:38 a.m. or 5:39, so what's a minute? They can see 52% of the moon in Australia at the same time, apparently, that we can see from Nashville, Tennessee. Let's see here. Yeah, 52.8% also in Nashville, Tennessee. At a time of, I think it says 2:54. And I may not be getting the times right, but you know they're very close here. And of course, it's December 18th here. So what I want to get to is a little Google map here and show you that there's the United States. I've actually got it marked on Tennessee. And we spin the Google globe around to Perth, Australia. I think it's 11,100 something miles. I'm not exactly sure. But explain to me how in the world, if the moon is in Australia, you can see it in the United States, or vice versa, the moon's in the United States, and you can see it in Australia. Dan just told us it's flat, and that's all it is. It is flat. So I got a little experiment here with a globe and a moon we're going to do. There we go. Here comes our moon in. Here's South America. You see the United States rotating around. So everybody's seeing the moon here in Tennessee and the United States also. And as our moon comes around the globe, we see that here comes Australia. And right now, there's no way you can see the moon in the United States, but they say you can. There's no way on a ball that you're going to tell me that you could be on one side of the ball and see on the other side of the ball. I took this outside with a globe, set it up, and even if I get up high or low, and with the globe tilted at 23 degrees, there's just no way. It doesn't matter how far you walk back to look at it, you cannot see the opposite side of the globe. It's not going to happen. Flat Earth, it's over. Moon shows the truth. It is a flat plane that we live on.
Question the globe and to see if it really.
One of my satellites over in Antarctica discovered a pyramid. It's not on the ice. It's 2,000 feet under it.
Russian researchers posted near the giant South Pole subglacial Lake Vostok have reported eerie anomalies and incidents over the past few years that sometimes seem to border on the frayed edge of creeping madness. Artificial structure found under 2 miles of ice during April 2001. One of the world's great secrets was revealed. An ancient structure or apparatus that lay encased miles under the hard Antarctic ice was detected by a roving spy satellite. The U.S. military immediately moved to quash the reports, and the mainstream news media dutifully complied. Despite the news blackout, reports still surfaced that a secretive excavation project had commenced on the heels of the discovery. Some European countries formally protested the excavation by the U.S. military. Excavation deep into the ice. What's down there? If it's something the U.S. military has constructed down there, then they're violating the International Antarctic Treaty, said an aide to Nicole Fontaine, at the time he was the European Parliament's French president. If not, then it's something that's at least 12,000 years old, which is how long ice has covered Antarctica. That would make it the oldest man-made structure on the planet. The Pentagon should heed the calls of Congress and release whatever it's hiding. The federal government and the Pentagon ignored the calls. High technology and strange events. U.S. Air Force's incredible subterranean giant Earth borer. Soon after, some military observers noted that robotic devices were being shipped to the South Pole, and speculation erupted about the belief by some that the U.S. Air Force had transported their mammoth nuclear-powered tunnel boring machine, the Subterrane, on AC-5A to a secret Antarctic base. The Subterrane, a cylindrical vessel that is said manned with a crew of 4 to 6, is capable of subterranean travel and has undergone tests in Nevada, Colorado, and New Mexico. Designed to bore through hard rock strata, drilling into the ice would be like a laser cutting through a marshmallow. Earth bored, like a laser cutting through a marshmallow. Following the frenzied events of early 2001, the news broke of a mysterious medical emergency that forced an evacuation of unnamed personnel during the depths of the Antarctic winter, the first event of its kind during the dangerous South Pole winter season. Shortly after that, the region was shaken by an unusual earthquake. Seismologists located the temblor at the epicenter of a buried structure in East Antarctica. Yet still the military resisted making any comment. A magnetic anomaly formed, intensified, and spread to the vicinity of the Russian Vostok base. Russian researchers were shocked and puzzled. Meanwhile, the American military airfield buzzed with activity as flights came and went at a dizzying pace. Heavy machinery, some pretty exotic, appeared on the bleak Antarctic ice sheet. Unverified reports claimed that the nuclear-powered Earth borer Subterrane arrived. Subterrane sent to explore prehistoric machine? Finally, the American and European media were pressing hard for some believable answers when 9/11 occurred and the U.S. was suddenly under terrorist attack. Domestic and international focus immediately shifted from the Antarctic to New York City and Washington, D.C. The mysterious events in Antarctica were forgotten. 2002, TV crew disappears. A California TV crew filming in the Antarctic went missing in November 2002. Supposedly, a video discovered among the crew's personal effects by a special U.S. Navy SEAL rescue team tasked to find the filmmakers confirmed earlier reports of a huge artifact buried under the ice, a prehistoric machine that may be of alien origin. The U.S. government said it will seek to block the airing of a video found by Navy rescuers in Antarctica that purportedly reveals that a massive archaeological dig is underway 2 miles beneath the ice, stated a press release that appeared briefly on the studio production's website. Time vortex erupts as one bizarre event followed another. A research team of U.S. and UK scientists accidentally came across a mind-numbing discovery. While working on a joint weather research project, the team witnessed the creation of a spinning vortex of time. U.S. physicist Mary Ann McLean allegedly testified that she and her colleagues became aware of a spinning gray fog in the sky over their heads. They initially dismissed the phenomenon as merely part of a random polar storm. The spiraling vortex, however, did not disperse. Stranger still, despite gusts of wind and briskly moving clouds overhead, the weird spinning gray fog remained stationary. Intense magnetic anomaly. Deciding to explore the odd phenomena, the group took one of its weather balloons and attached a meteorological instrument to it that calibrated temperature, barometric pressure, humidity, wind speed, and a scientific chronometer to record the times of the readings. After attaching a cable to the balloon and securing the other end to a winch, they released it. The balloon and instrument package soared up